Origins 101, Evolution Defined. A simple definition of evolution is change in living things over time. More specifically, evolution is a change in the genetic makeup of a specific population of living things. Even more precisely, it is referred to as the change in gene frequency in a population over time. Let's think about what these words mean. What do you remember about genes? You are probably familiar with DNA and how it contains instructions necessary to make a particular living organism. Smaller parts of DNA that contain instructions for specific traits are called genes. Traits like your height, hair color, eye color, and even the shape of your earlobe are determined by your genes. These traits are passed from one generation to the next through genes. You inherited certain traits from your parents through their genes, and you will pass on certain traits to your children through your genes. Now let's think about the word frequency. Frequency means how often something happens. Gene frequency refers to how often a certain gene appears in a population. How does gene frequency change? Although Charles Darwin and the scientists of his time didn't know anything about genes, Darwin did have some ideas about how changes happened in a population. He believed that more offspring are born than can survive on the available resources. Variation exists among the offspring that are born. Some variations give an organism more of an advantage than others. For example, animals with slightly longer legs might be able to better outrun predators. An animal with thicker fur would be more likely to survive the winter. A brightly colored male bird might be more attractive to the female bird, increasing his chances of being able to reproduce. A tortoise with a slightly longer neck might be able to reach food better. A fish with larger fins might be able to swim better. Individuals whose variations give them an advantage survive and reproduce. As they have babies, the advantageous traits are passed on more often. Over time, those traits become more common in the population. A famous example of how this process works involves the finches in the Galapagos Islands. Variation exists in the finch population. Some finches have small beaks, while others have large beaks. The finches with smaller beaks eat smaller seeds. The finches with larger beaks eat larger seeds. One year during drought conditions, the plants with smaller seeds didn't do well, so there were fewer seeds available for the birds to eat. Most of the available seeds were large. Because there was not enough food for all the small-beaked birds, many of them did not survive. Since most of the available seeds were large, more large-beaked finches survived and had babies. Because fewer small-beaked finches were having babies, fewer genes that produce small beaks were passed on to the next generation. Because most of the birds that were reproducing had large beaks, more of the genes that produce larger beaks were passed on to the next generation. In other words, the frequency of genes that determine beak size had changed within the population of finches. That change in gene frequency could be called evolution. Specifically, microevolution. Another year when there was a regular amount of rain, the plants with small seeds grew better, which meant the small-beaked finches had plenty to eat. More of them survived to have babies, which means there were more genes for small beaks in the population again. Once again, there was a change in the gene frequency in the finch population, which would be an example of microevolution. During a year with extra heavy rainfall, the plants with larger seeds didn't do as well. Without as much food available for birds with large beaks, more of them died before reproducing. But the small-beaked finches, which still had plenty of food, survived and had babies, which meant there were more genes for small beaks within the finch population. Once again, a change in gene frequency, or microevolution, had occurred in the finch population. There is a lot of evidence in nature for microevolution. Another example is the flu virus. The reason we need a different flu shot every year is because the virus has changed some since last year. These small changes in living things are well documented. When scientists talk about the fact of evolution, they are referring to these kinds of changes, in other words, to microevolution. Although many scientists believe that lots of microevolution over millions of years is the same thing as macroevolution, many other scientists believe microevolution does not add up to macroevolution, and that some other factor or factors must be involved. As Origins 101 continues, we will learn about natural selection and the important part it plays in the theory of evolution.